Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the ThyGap podcast. It's a ThyGap Thursday, so we all know what that means. My name is Bogus Noog, and as always, with me is
Being brute.
Brute. Another great show we have for our listeners today.
Yes, it's a fantastic show. I don't think people should miss it.
Exactly. We're using an audible medium
Yes,
to talk about why reading
it's better.
is not easy.
It's not easy, guys.
Yeah, not the biggest secret in the world, but I think things will get more clarified in the context section of this episode. But before we get into that, Brute, the most important formality, of course, is our socials. On Instagram, we are.
@_ThyGap.
On Twitter and Vero.
@ThyGap.
And our email is...
mindthygap@gmail.com.
Brrrah.
Yes, and please, one correction. It's not a formality.
Uh-huh.
The main purpose.
The main purpose
Yes, the purpose of our episode,
of the podcast.
of the podcast.
Yes.
In fact, our existence
Yes,
is just to do these socials.
that's it.
That's all. Rest that follows are fillers.
Yeah, and also a very special mention to three folks. Brute, we kept mentioning in the past episodes how the listeners of the English podcast like to maintain a dignified silence.
Yes.
Now they've broken that silence finally. We have Amrut, Shrikant, and Tarun, all of them writing and saying how much they enjoyed the English podcast as well.
Yes. The painful pain is over.
Is over, yeah.
We've been recognized.
Yeah, hopefully the dams have broken, the gates are open,
Yeah.
and
The first blood is drawn. So
Yes.
we are expecting more,
action.
Yeah, more educated population to start writing to us who also listen to.
Yeah, that's what happens. As soon as you break your seal, you're like, wow, I'm young now. I'm an adult.
Yes, and I want more of it.
I want more of this. It hurt the first time.
Yes, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I like the pain.
They tell me I'll like it later. Yeah. So,
We could do a completely different episode.
virginity, it's not easy.
You're not going to get back. You ain't going to get it back.
Yeah. Reading, it's not easy, Brute. We get to
Yes.
our world famous, it's not easy template, of course.
World famous. In fact, now at the rate at which we are expanding our presence as humans in the universe,
Oh, yeah.
I think it's universe famous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
We are expecting people from Uranus.
Mm.
Let me say that again.
Yes.
We are expecting people from Uranus
Mm.
to be listening to our podcast.
Wonderful. And there's a whole community living there.
Yeah.
So
Grey people. That's what we call it. Big-eyed grey people.
yeah. The world famous template, of course, is we start off with explaining the context. In what context are we talking about reading, Brute? Take it away.
Okay, so here is the thing. There's an interesting conversation I was having with my friend. And the conversation is about how he is hooked on to this audiobooks.
Right.
And I obviously was trying to debate that audiobooks is primarily consumption. It doesn't fulfill the purpose of reading a book.
Yeah.
And that is what is wrong with this generation. Okay. I'm going to speak like a 83-year-old uncle now.
Right.
That this is not how you consume
These
books.
damn kids. Yeah.
Modern problems need modern solutions.
Which is what is being attempted with these
Audiobooks, yeah.
However,
But then that's a very skewed experience that you get,
yeah.
right? Of actually consuming a book.
So this is generally what the context is. We're looking at reading in the 21st century, in the modern times today.
Yeah, without our eyes.
And what gets passed off today as reading. The examples of how far this has come and where it's probably going to.
Correct.
And our own ThyGap take on it, of course.
Absolutely. The whole thing is our ThyGap take,
Yeah.
by the way. It's very subjective from the ThyGap perspective.
That's it. You get a topic idea, and the first thing is, okay, let's just do an episode on it.
Yeah.
That's it. Then we'll
Exactly.
figure
That's how
out-
we roll.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's always informative.
Yeah.
And I could able to rhyme because I'm a reader,
So,
not a pleader.
right. So now that we're done with the context,
Yeah.
let's get into the meat of it. Why is reading today not easy for a layman who's looking to get into this?
I think the first thing that I can think of is the culture. The culture of reading itself has kind of stopped evolving or stopped being passed on.
Right.
Like if I ask you the question, how did you end up reading?
That's because of my father.
Right? It's the same thing. All my family, like joint family, siblings, my parents, everyone,
Yeah.
they read something or the other. So there were a lot of books lying around.
Yeah, I had two very strong influences actually. Initially, it was because of my father, but even if I wouldn't have had that influence,
Yeah.
I later studied in boarding school where you have a lot of time in between activities.
Yeah. By boarding school, he means boredom school.
Exactly. And a lot of my peers and juniors and seniors
Yeah.
were heavily involved in reading.
Right.
So it kind of rubbed off on,
Correct.
it would have rubbed off on me if I wasn't already,
Right. And that's exactly what I mean by culture.
Right.
The culture of reading.
Yeah.
Anything you wanted to know, you had to go out and read.
Yeah.
Now it's just predominantly you search for it, you kind of listen to it over a podcast, which is ironic that we are talking about it in a podcast.
Yes.
But then, all these other mediums have kind of popped up, like a YouTube video. Like today, even me, and I'm guilty of it too. If I want to know how to do something,
Right.
I'm kind of like searching it on YouTube rather than reading like a 5-step process or
Oh, yeah.
whatever,
Me too. Me too.
right?
Yeah.
And it can be the dumbest thing, like how do I unscrew or change a battery in a remote, or how do I change the battery of my car keys?
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at this YouTube video rather than reading it out and making mistakes and getting it in the 4th or 5th attempt.
Yeah.
So that I think is the first difficult thing, is to get that demographics or people around you who are actually readers, because that's how it gets passed on. You see someone reading, you kind of have that feeling. And again, I might be, overplaying this a little, but it's just like smoking, right? When you look at somebody reading a book, for some reason, it looks very intellectual. It has that air that, oh, this guy is doing something smart. And why I call it the smoking effect is when you look at somebody smoking, you innately have that feeling that this guy is so cool.
Even if not for the cool aspect, there is a hidden interpretation there. I mean, why it looks appealing, from an outsider's perspective, is you see this person being completely by themselves and there is no hint or there is no sign of them being uncomfortable or them being awkward or them not having a good time where they are. Because readers who are habitually, readers, wherever they're just happy sitting by themselves and getting lost in the book.
Yeah.
And it's evident in people's faces how engrossed and how engaged they are with the book. And if I'm looking at them from an outsider's perspective, it's like, man, this is way better than me being stuck in this bad company.
Yeah.
Or this is way better than me being stuck all by myself and having just to, look at different directions and people watch.
To get engaged.
And to figure out like, what do I do now? I'll check my phone because I'm getting bored.
Yeah.
But what that guy is doing seems to be much better. Like he seems to be getting entertained.
The thing that is appealing about reading for me, and it goes way back into my childhood, the stillness that a reader has. I was a very fidgety kid, very restless, too much of energy, blah, blah, blah. I used to jump around, do 10,000 other things.
Yeah.
But when I saw my cousins read, or when they were reading a book sitting on a table, on the couch or whatever, the stillness that they had while they were reading. And when you kind of like wake them up from that zone,
Right.
and ask them like, hey, what is it that you're doing? Why are you so quiet or something? Oh, I'm reading this book. This is the story. And they would speak with so much of energy and excitement.
Yeah.
And that was like, oh, I'm not having this kind of energy, me being so energetic and all, right? And you can see that with anybody. Like even if you remember newspaper, again, that's another culture which is dead.
Yeah.
If you remember the times where your grandfather was sitting in the morning reading his newspaper,
Right.
his whole body would be dead still. The only thing that probably would be moving was the hand which carried the teacup, and just dead still, absorbing all this information from the newspaper.
Yeah.
And that is another reason why I find reading is like the best thing.
Right.
Reading in general is this extremely high concentration job.
Yeah.
It demands a very high level of concentration.
Yeah.
So if you're concentrating that much, the rest of the body has no work. It's just you, the book, and the brain.
Yeah.
Right? There's these 3 people who are involved in it, which is why that stillness comes, because the rest of the body is pushing energy to your brain, trying to like comprehend what you're reading, trying to build structures, use your imagination and all that.
Yeah.
That those so much of activity is happening in your brain. The external side of you for an onlooker is what is wrong with this guy.
Yeah. And another reason, like another thing that it reminded me of was in today's times where, people have to get some kind of counseling or course or something. People need to be taught soft skills.
Yeah.
Like how do you cold approach people?
Yeah.
How do you engage others in conversation, etc. Because when you're looking at it at the level of small talk, which is general small talk,
How is the weather?
that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It almost never works, and people always find it so difficult. People find it not easy.
Yes.
It's not easy.
No, you have to keep plugging it
Yes, it's not easy to do that because small talk is so shallow. It lasts maybe like 2 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And after that, both of you are stuck in this awkward silence
in. Right.
where you're not talking anymore.
Right.
And just kind of like, yeah, that's the end of what we had to say to each other. Kind of.
Correct. Correct.
But even with strangers, complete strangers, and I'm thinking of, chance encounters in trains most of the time that happened for me personally.
Yep.
Where if I started a conversation, first of all, with someone who's reading, like you said, it's either about, hey, what are you reading? Or they ask you. And more often than not, you notice that people are quite open, even though they're quite engrossed.
Yeah.
If you break them out, if they're liking the book they're reading, especially,
Exactly.
they're quite engrossed. They're actually still open to welcome you into that world and try to tell you what they are reading about, etc.
Right.
But the main thing I observed was the quality of conversation itself was different with these people, in the sense that, yes, it's a train, you're stuck with them. So at times it can get quite long and annoying and you don't know where to break it off because the arguments just keep going.
Yeah. Run to the washroom.
Yeah. But even then you're like, okay, this conversation would not have been possible in general, because this person is a reader. I can see there is depth to this person. I can see that they have their own kind of understanding and perspective. If they are very good readers, then they often have layered perspectives on things. And the surprising thing that you get to observe is there's so much difficulty with hollow small talk. But once you get a reader and a reader, now this conversation can go on for hours and hours.
Yeah. The other thing that I would like to add when you said that there's depth and all, the thing that kind of spills over you is the conviction levels.
Yeah.
I mean, when you speak to a reader, whether right or wrong, like that's secondary. But the
Right.
conviction with which they have a conversation is of much better and much higher quality.
Yeah.
When compared to you speaking to a guy who's like a sports club fan or, a movie fan, the conviction levels are very different when you speak, because it's not just that I like this book, I want to fight for it. It's almost like an ideological conflict, or it's an ideological debate.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond the story of the book or the content of the book, which is again an indication that the person has thought more
Right.
about what is just written in the book. And that's where it comes from, according to me.
Yeah, and it seems to be like a difference between having something to say versus trying to say something.
Correct.
Or wanting to say something.
Correct. Or just saying something for the sake of saying
For the sake
something.
of it. Yeah.
Which is most of it, right?
Peer
Most of
pressure,
the people
most
do
of the
that.
time. Yeah.
The other thing that I see about reading, I think it's the only activity where you self-correct faster than any other activity.
Right.
Again, on the top of my head, the only other thing that I can think of where you self-correct to like a positive outcome is probably cooking.
Okay.
The reason why I say that is it's a lot to do with instant gratification.
Right.
When you read a good book and say you lost your track,
Yeah.
and which does happen when you
Yeah.
read like a high quality book, you tend to lose your track in the plot.
All of a sudden, you find yourself not connecting.
Yeah, like
With the
what?
changes.
Wait, hold on.
Chain of
What's
events.
happening?
Yeah.
What's happening here? It doesn't.
How did we get here?
Yeah, how did we get here? And then you go back that page or two or a paragraph or two, and you read, and the moment you're able to start connecting to what you understood of the story versus what the writer is writing, you're like, yeah, this okay,
is
I
where-
got it.
yeah.
I got it now,
Yeah.
And that is high quality dopamine hit.
Yeah.
I don't know if it happened to you
Yeah,
ever.
yeah.
It happened to me a lot when I read Russian authors because they write this, 20-page dialogues and monologues
Yeah.
in a simple conversation. And often it's very complex and, 10,000 things. And you're like, oh shit, wait, why is he saying this? Why is he worrying about his friend's wife now?
Right.
And then you're like, go back and like, oh, this is how she's involved. Oh, this is where she was connected.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I'm Sherlock Holmes. I'm so smart. I figured it out. It can be like superficial, doesn't matter. But that very habit formation, right, where you are identifying you doing a mistake,
Yeah.
happens much faster in reading than compared to anything else.
Yeah. And there's a positive dopamine hit when you realize that, oh, yeah, the author was actually not in the wrong. It was me
Yeah, it was
who
correct.
missed or got distracted or whatever.
Correct.
Then
And
there's-
there is no shame in it.
There's no shame.
You
in it.
don't feel shame. You
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
feel embarrassed.
No, you feel good that, okay, it was actually there. I just had to go back and I
Yeah,
found it.
correct.
Now I can continue.
Yeah.
In terms of negative dopamine hit, there was an example I can remember. This kept happening to me again and again. Every 3 pages,
Yeah.
bro, I kept getting broken
Which
off.
book was that?
This was a book on Subhash Chandra Bose.
Oh.
Written by a
Was
guy.
it your social book in like
No,
8th
it
class?
was like a thick book, a biography,
Uh-huh.
and it was hyped to the sky
Uh-huh.
when it came out. The author was Mihir Bose.
Uh-huh.
And every 3-4 pages, I was losing, the chain of events.
It's a very weird book to lose chain of thoughts. Like.
Exactly.
Is it an autobiography?
No, it's a biography.
It's a biography. Okay.
You would think, right? Like it's a weird book or weird subject to get lost in because it's a Subhash Chandra Bose. It's a story.
It's a story, life story.
But the narration was so non-linear. It kept jumping between years and years, and it was like whiplash. I'm not able to understand where it's going.
Yeah.
Every 3 or 4 pages book. So if it was a positive dopamine hit, like we discussed, I would have gone back and I've realized, oh yeah, here is where I missed it. Now I can continue. But every 3 or 4 pages, it kept happening. For me, in the end, it was like, I cannot read this book anymore. Like I had to just stop it. And I realized it is not me, it is the author. Like it's the book actually.
It was not like it happened in a negative way. But the book that really made me go back and forth, can you guess that? It's one of your favorite books too. It's a cult classic.
Russian?
No. American.
Catch-22?
Yo,
okay.
Sweet Lord, yeah.
Yeah.
The amount of things that were happening.
Yeah.
And the similarity of things that were, the book, right?
Right.
The consistency that they maintained, the author maintained in that recurring situational thing.
Yeah.
It was extremely tiring, I'll not deny. But the fact that it was so funny and it was so, well written.
Yeah.
I just was like, I don't care if I have to read this book 20 times or 100 times. I'll just try to get to the gist of it.
Yeah.
And that was one of the examples. But you get the point, right?
Right.
Like, it's the fact that, what was a book that it became very famous recently? Atomic Habits. Reading develops that to you.
Yeah.
Like once you read a book, or like say 10 books in say in a year,
Right.
okay? And you look back a year and you realize that, I became a little more patient.
Yeah.
So you start inculcating this personality or traits.
Yeah.
You become a little more patient. You become a little more driven. You become a little more, belligerent is the word. Like you push through things even when they get tough.
Yeah, this actually reminds me of 2 points actually which are very ThyGap kind of points, because ThyGap podcast, we try to talk about things that are not usually talked about in that way.
Yeah, like incest and and crypto.
And also, these hi-fi, high-funda words that people keep throwing around. But hardly there seems to be a mention of, how to. Like if someone is starting off, like what are the hacks? Like what can I do? Is there a way that I could maybe ease myself into, the process? And reading is one of those things. Like we keep finding content around how reading is so important and all that. But again, in terms of like the hacks or how it can be used as a hack, maybe not as explored. Like one thing you mentioned, patience. How reading helps increase our patience and why patience is actually important to have is patience is
a new
easy.
Episode.
Haven't we already done that?
I don't think patience we have not done it.
Or then it's going to be
a new episode.
Yeah.
Right there.
But patience is extremely important. It's a virtue, first of all.
Virtue of gods.
Yeah. But reading helps improve on patience in practical terms. Like it can be considered a practice for that. Because when you're reading, you're tempered by the speed at which you read.
Yeah.
You can't outpace yourself. And you can't outpace your imagination.
Yeah.
And when you're reading good books, it can get frustrating because you desperately you want to race against the words.
You want to hurry up to the end.
You want to hurry up. And especially where things are getting really spicy.
Yeah.
You want to read faster and faster and you want to skip your meals and all that stuff.
And where else patience comes into picture? To control that temptation of, I'll just flip the book other way around, read the ending and then go back to where I was reading.
And how much of a,
buzzkiller that is.
Buzzkill that would be. And so you're like, I want to do it, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
So reading, patience works in this way, which is because you're tempered by your speed of reading, you have to eventually give in and adjust with that.
Correct.
So that allows you to develop patience, just like how writing allows you to develop patience because it tempers the speed of your thinking.
Yeah.
You can only write as fast.
Yeah.
You can't outpace your thinking. So that is one thing. And the other thing was where you mentioned stillness, observing your cousins and how still they were. I feel like that just shows how people who are more caught up in the external world, and the superficialness of it, that we can say that is being caught up in the external churn. And so they're getting stuck or swayed in that external world. So they are not still because physically they are getting swept away by the external chaos around them. Whereas someone who is reading in peace, they're physically still, but internally now they are swaying and they're having an adventure. They're jumping off cliffs.
Yeah.
And they're probably
killing people.
They're killing people, the highest of highs and the lowest of
Yeah.
lows.
Living rich, living poor.
All of it, yeah. And internally, they're doing all of this. So in today's spiritual funda, with the added or with the additional focus on mental health and all that, where people, again, buzzwords, I keep telling, like, explore your inner self, inner engineering, do the journey inside of you, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, that's well and good. But for a person who is used to being caught up with the outside world, how do they start? Because initially, speaking of things that are not easy, Brute, this thing, the internal exploration and all that,
is the worst of the lot.
it is the king of not easy things.
Yeah.
Especially when you have to make the switch.
Right.
So reading actually can be a great primer or a great way of workout exercise, where it helps you, because when you're reading, it fires up your imagination and it completely involves you in that way.
And for all the people who complain of saying that, oh, I don't have me time, again, this is a funny incident because this is what my father told me. Again, because I was a restless kid and all. He was like, how do I calm myself or whatever?
Right.
And he was like, it's very easy, provided like you stick with it for some time. And the hack that he told me was like, read 10 pages. And even if you can read more, don't.
Yeah.
Even if you feel that I can read more, don't read more. But read 10 pages, go for a walk, think about the 10 pages you read.
Right.
You will start realizing that how much you don't need the external world. And it's a great way of spending time with yourself. And this was the activity. How it grew was, it was 10 pages and then, you read another 10 pages, do it for some time.
Right.
And then once I finished the book, it was always like, I would sit with my father and we would basically discuss that what I understood and what he understood. And again, the conversation of ideologies.
Yeah.
When I started doing that, there came a point where I didn't even need my father to do that retrospection.
Right.
I just was like, this is what the author said. This is what I understood. Okay, what do you... And it would happen randomly. It was like, I just had to be bored enough to get triggered into like, let me discuss the book with myself.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is something that happened to you.
No, I've never discussed a book with myself. I'm not that weird. But I was just basically some character movements, if it's a fiction book, they kind of get stuck. Like I keep thinking about that, especially if it is new information that I just came across.
Yeah.
That I never knew about.
Yeah.
That definitely gets me thinking about like how that might have played out and how
that is called
look?
discussing the book with yourself. When I say like discussing the book with myself,
right.
It is not like about, okay, let me start from the beginning. No, it is just like this random instance.
I picture you in front of a mirror and saying, Brute, this is what you read, all that stuff.
What is weird is you picturing me.
Yeah, exactly.
And that too in front of a mirror.
Exactly.
You're creeping me out by the day, by the hour.
There is no other place I could imagine you more than in front of a mirror.
See, when the looks which deserve that much of admiration, you have to be in front of the mirror a long time.
Yeah.
I understand why you are never in front of the mirror.
Yeah, I know the thinking.
If I was you, I would be on top of a building looking down.
Yeah, I know the thinking that exists about the looks. So that's the reason why. But
let's not digress. It's all personal things. Yeah.
There was another thing that we were talking about. For listeners, we actually recorded more than 45 minutes of this episode.
And then Bogus used his intelligence by not pressing the record button.
And it got erased.
Yes.
The card got full, etc. So we are redoing this. So the other thing we talked about was how when you notice someone who's reading, from a third party perspective, for some people, they kind of subconsciously see the appeal in it, or they see something which, is enticing.
Yeah.
And
you could have just used appealing. That's what you used previously. But no, you want to be more complicated. You want to be more, I don't know what is the superlative of being intelligent, but
the lack of constant mirror exercises. I cope in this way. Yeah. So that's the point. Like, why would you think that, anyone would find that appealing? A lot of people do. And what is that aspect which you think makes it look appealing on any level from an outsider's perspective?
For me, it is because of that stillness. The stillness with which somebody sits and reads something. There is no other activity that will give you that kind of stillness. I can't think of any other activity which gives... I mean, don't give me meditation and all that. That's all secondary. That's you can't really count it into daily activities or like a hobby. I've never heard somebody say like meditating is my hobby. Now it is becoming too cool to meditate and all.
Yeah, and reading again would help a lot in getting used to the concept of meditating. Otherwise, actually, even if you use meditation as an example, reading is still better because meditation is chaos. Like there is no stillness. It is the opposite of stillness. Like you're bouncing all over the place. But in reading, you have that one anchor where even though it is completely mental, you are focusing on the words, you are focusing on the plot or the narrative. So your imagination is active and your imagination is making a movie for you. Basically.
I would debate on that. I still think that meditation is one level above reading.
No, level above in the sense now we're talking about, what is the competence. So if someone is an expert meditator, obviously that's better.
No, for any meditator.
Any meditator starting, there is no chance of stillness. In the beginning, there is no chance of stillness. It is completely opposite. It's very chaotic inside your head when you're trying to suddenly
Yeah,
start.
but you don't get to see that as an outsider. I don't think you really can make out the difference whether he's a pro or an amateur or someone who's just doing it.
I can because
That's because you wake them up and ask.
No, again,
You ask a guy who's meditating that, are you someone who's been meditating for a long time? You use the same thing that you do for readers to a meditator also.
No, this also has to do with culture aspect. Like I've been around different levels of people and you can see a difference,
But see, with the reader, that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
Like even an amateur guy who never reads can find that somebody who's reading is still. So we are looking at it from a very generic perspective. Like an expert guy would figure out that even if somebody is trying to read a magazine, the guy would be like, he's not a reader.
But it's the sheer vibe or the energy of that person when they're engrossed in either reading or meditation, right? There's a clear difference between someone who's not as engrossed or not as intensely involved with the book.
I think you and me should not talk about meditation because of that one incident that has happened where everybody was asked to meditate and we were the jackasses looking at each other saying, what is wrong with people?
Right. But yeah, I think at a very core level, like what seems appealing to an outsider, first thing is it's common. Like you see someone who has more money than you. You see someone who's having more fun than you. Who's having more of a good time. Both of you are at the same nightclub. Yeah. But for some reason, I'm not having as much fun.
Yeah, they seem to be getting out of more from the night.
They're getting more out of it.
Yeah.
Even though I may be spending more here.
Yeah.
So we all have that kind of curiosity, like what could it be? So the commonality is I'm seeing someone who is having a better experience. And I'm in the same place, relatively speaking, but I'm not having as much of a good experience here.
Right.
So what could it be? It's that it follows the proof that this person is enjoying themselves. It's, I think at a very core level, it is that they are not alone. I'm sorry. They are alone probably, but they're not lonely.
Right.
They are in company.
Yeah.
They're having some company, clearly. And it's not just any company, it is good company. It is like great company. You can make out by their vibe.
They're not bored.
They're not bored of it.
Yeah.
They're not struggling through it like I'm struggling through. I checked Twitter,
Instagram.
got done with it. Now I moved to Insta.
Yeah.
Now I got done with all of my socials.
And then you went back to Insta.
Yeah, it's like I'm just doom scrolling.
Yeah. The other thing, I think the word is engagement.
Yeah.
You look at someone in a coffee shop reading a book, sitting all by themselves, and they're like supremely engaged.
Yeah.
Which is again that contradiction, right? You're extremely engaged, but you're supremely still.
Right.
And that confuses, that excites you, or that mystery, or, the existence of two opposite things in the same body.
Yeah.
It kind of gives you that intellectual look or whatever. I don't know, cool look.
Yeah, I mean, that is the superficial part of it.
Yeah.
But then we were also talking about how compared to small talk, which is so, challenging, unless you're sociopathic or something like that.
Yeah. Unless there is malice. Involved.
Yeah. Conversation with complete strangers also becomes so easy when you have common ground. Like it could be reading or it could be, cars or whatever, sport, whatever. But in our case, at least, even though we had just met maybe a couple of times by then, things really got going to another level because we discovered that both of us actually read, here and there. We had a history of reading books.
The exact incident was, if I remember correctly, I was speaking about some book. And we were all around a table drinking.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like turned towards me and like, you read that book too? You read that book too? And I'm like, yeah, I love the book.
Yeah.
And you were like, I love that book too. And a lot of people don't seem to be liking it. And then we got into a conversation. And that kind of made me look at you in a different way. I just thought you're this dumb rich guy who's just balding at a very early age and kind of bored. Probably is contemplating killing himself in a matter of days.
Right.
And then when we had this conversation, like, I think I can have a conversation more than 4 sentences with him. This is great. I have one more Insta follower now.
Yeah, and similar experience on my side also. Like my initial impression was, this guy is just vain. He is a con man. He goes around deceiving people.
Yeah.
Spends probably 12 hours in front of the mirror for sure.
Absolutely. See, it was from the beginning you were imagining me in front of a mirror.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw you behave the way you behave, right, usually. That was it for me. Like this guy, I need to make sure I don't sign any documents and
no sharing wallets, no car keys.
I was thinking don't lend any money and don't borrow also.
And like a typical con man, I sold the idea that I'm a great reader to you, which is amazing.
Right. But what was the instant reaction? Like you spoke about the reaction that I had when I figured out that you read the same book.
Yeah.
The instant reaction for me was, until then, I was kind of thinking like, okay, I'm just around a bunch of people that I'm doing a play with. We are kind of trying to unwind after a rehearsal.
Right.
So, we're not looking to do some great shit here. We're just looking to kill the time, basically.
I'll have those 2 beers and chuck.
Basically, kill time.
Yeah.
We have nothing better to do.
Yeah.
So, just relax here for a while, kill time, and go back home and crash.
Right.
But then when you figure out that, okay, someone else has read the same book or they're into reading, then for me now, the options all of a sudden become limitless.
Right.
Now, what I feel is like, okay, now I can basically pluck any topic out of my head that I might have gotten involved with or engaged with in the recent past.
Yeah.
Whatever is going on in my head right now, I can pick and throw any topic and I can expect that there will be a comeback. I can expect that there will be a perspective on it. I can expect that, this conversation can keep going.
Yeah. I completely
effortlessly.
Correct. Especially when you said that, remember, I don't know if you remember this conversation where you said like, I was involved with smuggling and all for some time.
Yeah.
That's how I made my money. And I definitely said like, that's a great thing. You should teach me, 1 or 2 tricks about that.
Right.
I'm already into conning people. So I want to go to the next level.
Yeah.
And
we should join forces.
Yeah. We spent the whole night in a Amazon warehouse and like trying to get into things and smuggle them out. It was great fun.
It was great fun. It was, a productive educational discussion on how to scam people.
It was a constructive night.
ThyGap, subscribe.
And share.
Share
the dark secrets of ThyGap coming soon.
Yeah. But now
I think we will be the dumbasses. You know how these videos are coming, like the dark side of XYZ company and all. We will be the guys who will like on our official channel.
Yeah.
We will be like the dark side of ThyGap.
Right.
What ThyGap never tells people.
Cancel ourselves. Yeah. But the other thing we mentioned in the context was also when it came to reading, like we wanted to just take a stock of where it has evolved to, and it's definitely seen some evolution.
Yeah, where it is going wrong
over the years, and where are we right now? Where it is going? So the big evolutionary step was, of course, the Kindle.
Absolutely, beautiful
ebook
product.
Readers that was a significant milestone.
Yeah.
Then after that came the audiobooks. Then after that came the shorter versions of these books also.
Which is the horrible version. As you can see, we are evolving towards nonsense.
Yeah, on one side, it kind of makes sense from the entrepreneurial kind of perspective that, okay, how do we make each and every service easy, like getting a cab in a city, make it easy, come out with an app.
Convenience.
So everything was driven toward convenience, and that's a great thing. But
it's not great after a point.
Especially in the case of reading, in the case of books, it's not only not great, but it seems to go against a lot of the benefits that actually, were involved in the package.
Yeah. See, up till Kindle, I had no problem.
Right.
And the reason is the convenience was when you read a book, obviously you come across these words where you don't know what they mean or what is it that they're trying to convey and all. And you have to like go through a dictionary and figure out the whole thing. But with Kindle, I don't have to carry 3 books.
Yeah.
Right? I'm reading and right there, if I don't get it, I click on the word. I can get the thesaurus or, the dictionary meaning of the word. So that part of the convenience was fine because it's just making my job easier to understand the book, which is what the concept of reading is.
Right.
But with audiobooks, it takes a lot of perks away from the whole activity.
Yeah, before we come into that, like I just want to go off on Kindle a little bit more. So one thing is what you mentioned. And the other thing is Kindle has always been a trade-off in the sense the biggest drawback is, of course, you'll miss that physical feel of paper.
The smell of the paper. The
smell of the paper
book.
and turning the page.
Yeah.
And finding out like what happened.
Yeah.
So that aspect of it is sorely lacking. It is missing. But the trade-off is that you get to carry hundreds of books with you at once.
Yeah.
It comes backlit. You can read it in darkness without disturbing others.
Yeah.
And in adding to what you mentioned about finding out meanings of words and, sentence examples of the same word and all that, there's also the fact that you can highlight sections of the book, which is what we do with paper books also. We use highlighters.
Correct.
We use bookmarks. And so Kindle has virtual bookmarks. Kindle has a way to highlight and make your own notes.
Right.
And then you can actually quickly refer to them in future.
Right.
Like what did I, and that's faster than a physical book also, that reference.
Right.
So that way it's great.
Yeah. It's just a little compromise on the experience.
Just a little compromise. Yeah.
But it's not like a complete overkill.
Yeah.
Like the audiobook.
Because the actual values or value add of reading as an exercise, I don't think you're losing in Kindle.
Yeah. My problem is trying to make reading a book a consumption game.
Which is the audiobook thing.
Which is audiobook. Yeah. I don't like that. Because reading is not about just gathering knowledge, which is what is being prophesized. I mean, in the same audiobook thing, the ads that I see is, read 10 books in like one day.
Yeah.
So-and-so reads 28 books in like 2 days.
Yeah.
No, you're not reading, bro.
Obviously not reading.
You're just consuming stuff.
Yeah.
It is not reading. No matter how hard you sell it to me, I just won't be sold on the fact that you're making me read 10 books in a day.
So in how many ways would you say people are losing out on the reading experience and its benefits by checking out an audiobook?
Off the bat, imagination. You kill the imagination.
Okay.
You kill the perspective through which you develop that imagination.
Right.
Right? So it is like the difference is between I read a story versus I heard a story.
Right.
So you have zero idea how much of interpretation you're going wrong in.
Yeah, if we're talking about imagination also, right? The problem is it's one of the best things about reading. It's actually allowing us to imagine, our own construct of the story.
Yeah.
And we are obviously automatically going to imagine it in a way that works for us.
Correct.
We are not going to imagine a character that does not fit. A person as a character who does not fit.
Right.
Because our brain is going to do that for us automatically.
Yeah.
We are going to imagine things in a construct where everything makes sense to us. How this character looks.
Yeah.
Like, this character probably looks like my second uncle on my mother's side.
Yeah.
Because of the characteristic traits and all that.
Correct.
So you place that person over there.
Yeah.
And then you give them their voice.
Right.
Their body language and all of that. How much you're engaged in doing all of this subconsciously, you're losing out on with an audiobook because someone else is already reading it for you.
Yeah.
And they're going to maintain their tone throughout.
Yeah.
So now, all that imagination.
Your narrative is gone.
Your narrative is gone. You're basically outsourcing it.
Yeah.
But that is one level of already major damage done there.
That's more than 50% of the damage done.
So your imagination is not being exercised. That means that goes as deep as your mind is not being worked out.
Exactly.
And if your mind is not being worked out, if you're young, then that impacts your creativity.
Exactly.
And your ideation process.
Exactly.
If you're old, it impacts your neuroplasticity, which is after a certain age, the brain becomes rigid.
Yeah.
And you need mental exercises to actually keep it nimble so that it still remains or retains that youthfulness to it, that youthful vigor to it. So neuroplasticity is a very real thing. And if that mental exercise or workout is not there, if your imagination is not being fired after a certain age, then you're going to age much faster.
Yeah.
Physically.
Yeah. And this is coming from Bogus's personal experience.
Yeah.
His lack of imagination and creativity is one of the reasons why he even knows the word neuroplasticity.
Yeah, I use 3 stretchers currently to get around. But the other thing, which is an even bigger crime, bro, this is bad enough.
Smuggling. We're talking about smuggling now?
No, this is already bad enough, what we described. But the much worse aspect of this, where the reader is losing out by going to audiobooks, is art. Any great art is supposed to be open to interpretation.
Correct.
Like the creator or the author or the director may have intended it in one way, but it is perfectly okay for someone to interpret in a different way.
It's called the freedom of interpretation.
Yeah. And the more ways a piece of art can be interpreted differently by different people, the more alive it is.
The more value it gets.
The more value it adds also.
Right.
Because it's adding value to different kinds of people in different ways. The biggest problem with interpretation is we are able to interpret things in our own way when we are driving the engine of the whole imagination, how the story is going. This character looks this way, this character speaks this way, there's no other way. So once you have someone take up that onus for you, when you outsource that narration to someone else, your entire interpretation is losing freedom. Like you're now going to be locked to their interpretation, because now they're not only reading the book to you, they're using their own tone.
Yeah.
And their intonation is fixed.
Yeah.
So now you are completely
Forced to kind of like...
You're a slave actually to their way of
big words.
interpretation.
Yeah.
It is slavery, I feel.
The way I connect
Because
it...
you're robbed of, your own agency there.
Yeah. The way I connect it is different. The whole freedom of interpretation, right? The first thing that gets affected is your own articulation.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Again, well-known fact, good readers have better articulation than non-readers.
Right.
And that's for a reason. The reason, according to me, is, say you're reading a fiction book. The whole activity of reading, how it is being translated into your brain or how it is being perceived by your brain, this is a non-confrontational debate that you as an individual have with the author. And that debate that you're having, where he's trying to outsmart you with, like I say, twist in the book or giving you a better scenario or better definition of romance or whatever it is.
Right.
You constantly are debating that now I'm not going to get surprised because yes, page 40 I did get surprised. I'm not going to let that happen to me again now. Now I'm going to like be more keen, more focused in making sure it doesn't happen. And it's very instinctive, right? Nobody likes getting surprised or taken by a hook. And that debate, that exchange of emotions that is constantly happening is what develops your articulation.
Right.
Because your thoughts are much more focused and clear now towards the story.
Yeah.
So when you take that away, if you listen to an audiobook or I don't know what you say, an audiobook, it's like, so John has said, Mary, don't go away. And there's all this emotion and all that crap.
Right.
And you're just listening to it like, Mary, don't go away. Oh, he's angry. But when you read the sentence, like John has told in a stern voice to Mary not to leave.
Yeah.
Your definition of stern voice is very different
Yes.
to anybody else.
Yes.
So you're not cultivating that whole aspect of feeling those emotions mentally.
Yeah.
Which is what affects your articulation or your clarity of thought. That is how I interpret, snatching the concept of freedom of interpretation away from you.
Right.
When somebody else is narrating it.
Yeah. And when we say snatching, we don't mean this is like a malicious or diabolical intent and all.
Yeah.
I think
Taking away. Like, how do we say it mellowly? Like,
No,
take away.
I think the intent, as far as
Rob
the
you.
intent is concerned, is probably to make things more convenient for people. Like
No, yeah,
to try
it
and
is
explore
convenient.
that.
Correct.
But unfortunately, the side effect,
It's a barter.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the reading aspect of it, it's not a one-to-one translation that's happening.
Yeah.
There's a lot being lost,
Yeah.
and the best parts being lost.
Correct.
You're being left with just a shell of the experience, which is you're consuming books now.
Yeah.
Just like you consume a Netflix show.
The last thing that you want to do.
The last thing that you want to do.
Yeah. The other thing that I feel audiobooks rob you away, and this is closely related to the whole concept of exercising your brain. Reading is, like I said, it's an extremely high concentration activity.
Right.
And when you listening is not that high concentration.
Yeah.
I'm not saying as an activity it doesn't demand. You are supposed to listen with a lot of concentration to make sure that, you grasp everything.
I feel it is harder to achieve.
It is harder.
Yeah.
But then in the pursuit of consuming books, you are going to kill that opportunity of, developing that trait.
Yeah.
And I've never heard somebody be a better listener by listening a lot. But I've heard that somebody is a better listener because they read a lot.
Yeah. Because it vastly improves your patience.
Exactly. And they're all correlated, right?
Yeah.
Your concentration level, your patience. And this is an interesting observation. Again, my personal observation. When you look at big readers, they are more keen to listen because they're so addicted to that activity of comprehending things.
Right.
They don't want to talk a lot.
Yeah.
They want to rather listen a lot. But if somebody is like, a talker or who's just listening to stuff on like YouTube or
Yeah.
a song or anything, it doesn't necessarily trigger that activity or addiction to listening.
Yeah.
Because listening is not about hearing people,
Right.
but listening is more about comprehending things, right?
Yeah.
And reading makes you comprehend or forces you to comprehend things more than you listening to something else.
Yeah, which is why, because of that patience, readers are able to listen better because they have the capacity to entertain their own inner thoughts
Yeah.
or inner monologue.
Yeah.
They've got enough practice
Yeah.
because of doing that with the author, like you
Yeah.
said, or with the characters.
Yeah.
When someone is talking, they don't have to keep interrupting.
Right.
Because normally when you come across people who don't read that much, there's only so far
They can go. Yeah.
in terms of listening. They always have to come back and interrupt immediately because they feel like they'll lose their train of thought.
And the other thing is, they think of a point in, say, third sentences.
Right.
And now they're just waiting for you to give a pause
Yeah.
so that they can tell that point that they got. And by the time they say it, it's completely irrelevant.
And they have not listened to the
rest of the call.
what
The
you
rest
have
of
said.
the
Because
speech.
they stopped listening right there.
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
And the other thing is not reading versus this audiobook stuff also impacts our ability to gain practice or expertise with language and communication, which it's not easy. It's not easy. Both episodes we did already. Check it out. In the sense that when you're reading, you're actually paying attention to the words. You're paying attention to
Usage of the word.
the usage of the words. In what context did they use this word? And how is this character reacting to this word?
Right.
Sometimes the reaction could be very intense.
Yeah.
Then you'll be like, what is about this word in this dialogue that caused them to react in that way?
Right.
Then when you investigate sentence examples or dictionary meanings, etc., now it not only sits in your head that, okay, this word means this, but then also I can use this word in this situation to have the desired effect.
Right.
Like I might want a lukewarm kind of reaction, then probably I won't use this word. But when I want to have a heavy, intense reaction, then I will use this word to underline the intensity of how I feel or whatever, And in audiobooks, you're just listening, you're hearing the word go by.
Correct.
And who has the patience? Like you can't stop the narrator and say, bookmark that in an audiobook. You can't ask an AI, like probably it'll come down
It will come down to that.
You can ask an AI, hey, what
Clip
does that
this
mean?
part.
Yeah, clip this part. What does that mean? Then the AI will tell you. Then, okay, if it gets to that stage, then maybe you're getting some of the same this thing.
Which is what is articulation. Right?
Yeah.
Like the reason articulation is not just about putting a sentence together, but it's also about making the sentence more impactful.
Yeah.
And it all, like again, like you said, the whole usage of the word and everything, it is coming into that umbrella of how do you make more impactful conversations,
Right.
which is basically usage of words.
Yeah. So yeah, why is this reading? It's not easy. What is the not easy part? I would say the not easy part is for anyone who is starting off now, wanting to develop a habit of reading. There is an immediate cherry, or no, there is a tempting kind of distraction.
Yeah.
That, hey, there's an easier way. It's like the same thing. You, instead of reading, which you can't do, why not just, do the same thing that you do with podcasts, which is you just keep it playing in the background while you do your laundry, you get stuck in traffic, all this stuff. Read a book also in the same way. And it does not work.
Right. You just can't do it.
You just can't do it.
The most important thing between reading versus listening is the retention.
Yeah.
You cannot retain
Yeah.
things for a long time if you just heard it.
Yeah.
But when you read something, the chances of you retaining for a long time is very high.
Yes. Why?
Because fundamentally we are beings of visual memory.
Yes.
We remember more things when we see it. And the whole concept of seeing is believing.
Right.
When you read something, you're visualizing all these things, right? So it's a key to visualization. So you tend to retain and remember things longer than what you've heard.
Yes.
Like how many things have you read? Like the whole concept of writing a letter is more, intimate.
Right.
Is because when
Very
you read
much
that
so,
letter, you remember the handwriting, the words that they used.
Yes.
So that experience is living or lasting longer in you, which is what helps you to retain it longer.
Yeah.
But say somebody told something very romantic to you. there's only so long that you can remember it.
Yeah.
After a point, you just probably would be uttering the words out
Yeah.
or paraphrasing it for all I care.
You may be remembering it completely wrong also,
Yeah,
which is
like-
one of the worst things that happens to our memories.
Exactly, which is why a lot of husbands have problems with their wives when
Yeah.
they like, remember what I told you then, and like, yeah, something about some haircut.
Yeah.
Like, but say they wrote a message, you have a better chance. You know exactly what they've written.
Right.
So reading is that thing. Like, it is the biggest key for you to retain things longer. And that's not just about knowledge out of the book or the story of the book, but it's a lot more things. It is about the emotions that you went through. It is about the narrative. It's about the debate you had with yourself.
Yeah.
The whole experience
Yeah.
of the story, which leads to visualization.
Yeah.
So if somebody doesn't know how to visualize their thoughts, again, this is another thing
This
that
is a
we can do.
great hack to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic hack.
Yeah.
Stop listening to motivational speakers. Stop listening to like your idols or anything.
Keep listening to the ThyGap podcast.
Exactly.
Subscribe and share.
This is what you need to do. All you have to do is turn on your phone, go to Spotify, whichever podcast app you have,
Play it.
search for ThyGap and subscribe.
Yeah. One other aspect I feel which is slightly hidden, why that visual memory that you spoke of, why also does it help in retention? I feel it is because that imagination that you're doing while reading a book, it is of your own construction.
Yeah.
Like you are fully involved.
Correct.
And you built it yourself.
Yeah.
So it is not something that someone just came and did and, you just have a reference of someone else, they did it this way.
Correct.
It is you yourself.
Yeah.
And you've imagined people as characters where for you it works the best.
Yeah.
So when it is so well constructed according to your own imagination, that helps, I feel, even more in that retention aspect. Of
Absolutely. It's like your baby.
Yeah.
You'll never forget your baby.
Yeah.
Which is why I feel, reading is such a lost art today. And it's pretty disappointing because the number of distractions, the patience levels are not there. People want to get done with things.
Yeah.
And it has become this race of consumption. It might be because of whatever. It might be because of social media, the YouTube, or, the whole FOMO of, somebody has completed so many shows, whatever.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. This is something that you can do. You should do for yourself.
Exactly. You don't go looking for the abridged 3-minute version of the Dark Side of the Moon album by Pink Floyd.
Correct.
You want to listen to the whole thing back to front.
Yeah. Otherwise, imagine movies are just trailers tomorrow.
Yeah, that's it.
You don't have to watch the movie, but the gist is this.
Watch the trailer.
Yeah. Which is already happening, right?
Watch
on YouTube.
100 movies in 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. And why are we stressing on the word retention? There is a very good reason behind it.
Because that's the only word we know.
That's it. And we read a book
Yeah,
that
we
had
read a
the
book.
word. So we have to use it now.
Retention is not easy. Future episode.
Of course. Why not? Retention is really important because this is retention versus just hearing or retention versus just consuming. When we're consuming out of boredom or we're consuming out of a desire to kill time. We're not consuming with any other intent of, reusing this or recycling.
Purposeful act. It's not a purposeful activity.
There is no intent of recycling this information anywhere. What retention does is, if we really absorb, value from a book and we retain what it actually wants to convey, even if we interpret it in a complete different way, when it's retained, what happens is, in real life terms, when we find ourselves in certain situations, where the best thing to do would be to use that knowledge that you gained from that book with great retention in the thick of the moment, when you're in it and you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do now? With great retention, this is one of the first thing that pops up. That, hey, remember me?
Yeah.
Remember me? You could actually do this in this situation.
Yeah.
This has helped me not only in interviews, but also in, I would say, important conversations at the workplace, off the workplace, where when I say important, I mean there are some stakes there.
Yeah.
It's not just a casual conversation.
Right.
There are some stakes. I'm looking to get something.
Somebody's trying to kill you.
Yeah. And I'm looking to get something out of it. And in those tense situations or when I really felt like, I have to react quickly or I have to respond quickly to this. It's a fraction of a second. Even in that fraction of a second, Brute, the things that I retained really well were some of the first things that popped up. And instantly I just used it.
Yeah.
And the effect it had on people was that they were completely taken aback. They were surprised.
Yeah.
Because like they were like, oh, did you just come up with this on the spot? Like, and it was not on the spot. And it was not even at the back of my mind or the forefront of my mind all of this time. I was not carrying this mental load. It completely disappeared into my retention.
Yeah.
And it's just popped up when I needed it the most.
Correct.
So this is what good retention does. It just helps us in those tight spots where we don't have a lot of time to decide, but we have to make the right decision.
Which is also what you meant by, keeping your brain active.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not allowing it to like freeze or like get rigid.
Yeah.
You need to keep it flexible so that it is able to do things where you otherwise would not think of doing. So your brain is thinking apart from you making it think.
Yeah.
Again, this is connected to reading for me, which is I've never read something without trying to imagine it.
Yeah. Me too.
Right? It just happens so organically.
Yeah.
So if you keep doing that enough, I think your brain gets kind of habituated to say like, okay, this guy is doing something, but let me build a parallel scenario just in case.
Right.
Just in case he needs it or whatever.
Yeah.
That is a great skill again, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if you see big business guys or people who do like tough jobs,
high caliber people,
jobs, high competence jobs, they emphasize on this a lot.
Yeah.
They say that you need to make your brain work beyond what you can imagine.
Right.
And that happens only with a certain amount of expertise.
Yeah. It's almost like if you don't do that, then calcification, they call it, right? Where that calcium forms on the rocks and all that.
Correct.
Correct.
It happens in water pipes also nowadays, which is how our flush water pressure is not high.
Exactly.
It's the closest example which people can relate to.
Guys, reading is important for your plumbing.
Exactly.
Finally, that. Yes.
The whole purpose of this episode.
That was the takeaway.
This is what we want to connect it. Reading, how can reading make you a better plumber?
Yeah.
Or give you a better understanding of plumbing?
Yeah. If you get into audiobooks too much, the plumbing in your home is going to get fucked.
It's going to fuck. Like, your flush ain't doing its job.
Nope.
Your faucet won't wipe it enough.
Yeah. But I think after that kind of a takeaway, bro, we have to end on that.
Absolutely.
On that note. So that was...
Nowhere else.
Yeah.
Nowhere else will you get this kind of connections.
Yeah. Reading with plumbing, there is no chance of that ever having happened. ThyGap, subscribe.
And share.
Yeah. So, bro, that's about reading.
Reading, it's not easy, but more in perspective of reading versus listening.
Exactly. We hope it was convincing enough. Don't get distracted by that audiobook hack or shortcut. Not every shortcut is worthwhile. Some things are still worth doing the long way out. Which also means listening to ThyGap English podcast episodes from start to finish religiously. That also improves patience. Anyways, so... guys, let us know your experiences with reading. Let us know if you made that transition from being a non-reader to a reader. What are the things that, stood out to you that maybe we didn't mention? That would be great to hear.
And also the take on reading versus listening to a book.
Yes.
Do we really consider someone who listened to an audiobook claiming that they've read the book to be genuinely have read the book or understood the book the way it was meant to be?
Yeah. Also, I would be very interested to know, bro, if there is something about audiobooks that we did not account for, like some great advantage that people are already finding that maybe we did not think of or it did not occur to us.
Yeah.
That would be great learning for us also. So let us know if we are wrong about anything. Probably not. Mostly not.
Never wrong.
Yeah,
we
won't have a podcast otherwise. So we won't have two podcasts.
Yeah, we are the pseudo experts.
Exactly. But that's it. Reach us at our socials. Let us know all that stuff that we asked for.
Absolutely.
It'll be good to hear from you.
Fantastic.
And
true feelings.
On Instagram, bro, where can they find us?
@_ThyGap.
And on Twitter and Vero.
@ThyGap.
And our email is
mindthygap@gmail.com. If you're not a listener, you can get these links.
You can read it on the description.
Yeah, you can read these handle names on the description.
Episode description, yes. And
soon we are going to leave the transcript of our whole episode in the description. So if you're not a listener, you can still read it,
Right. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is why reading is not so easy today.
It's not at all easy. A lot of distractions, a lot of noise.
Yeah, there's a lot of titillation.
Yeah.
With the audiobooks and shit.
Copulation.
But
and smuggling.
As we always say, ThyGap Podcast, subscribe.
And SHARE, share. Alvidaj.